and is now taking into effect. We are, just for you to know, we're live streaming the first section of this event, which is going to be a bit more formal. We're going to have a couple of amazing speeches, but we're going to tell you the details a little bit later. And then we're going to have a more informal session with breakout rooms, more interactive, which is going to be private, so not live streamed, but just so that everyone is aware of that. For general technological informations, I'm, well, general technological, but my name is Julia. I'm moderating today. And also if there's any kind of technological hiccups during the session today, feel free to send me a direct message. And I'm going to try to support you as good as I can. During the breakout sessions, there's always also someone in the main room. So if you have problems navigating the whole Zoom environment, please just let me know or Eskil Graf, who's also hosting this event today. Yeah, I think that's mostly the setup. Today we're organizing this from the IPB office in Berlin. And on a practical note, yes, please, for the people who weren't there yet, introduce yourselves in the chat if you feel like you want to kind of share who you are and where you're coming from today and what time it is for you today, because for us it's 1 p.m. CET. And we already have our cocktails ready, but I know for everyone around the world, they're coming from different places, and we're so happy to have this global community. Just as a formal kind of guideline for the first section, I would really appreciate it if you can turn on your video, but turn off your microphone. During the more interactive session, we would be happy for you to engage with all the others. But for now, it would be easier to do it this way. Okay, now we are starting with the session for today, and I'm asking IPB's Executive Director Rainer Braun, who will give us a short introduction into today's event and the meaning of the TPNW for activists today.
Dear friends of the TPNW and a world free from nuclear weapons, what for a historical moment. The treaty we were fighting for years comes to power. A big step forwards, a world without nuclear weapons, but still a long way to go. But today it is the moment to celebrate our success, that we reached the goal, the ban of nuclear weapons. Thousands of actions all around the world are celebrating today this event. Our opponents know that we were successful. The reaction of NATO, their lies against the treaties, shows again and again that we are on the right way to convince more people, to convince more societies, to convince more governments against weapons which can destroy the whole planet. I am sure that we can double the number of countries ratifying the treaty in a short period. The political support by the Scientific Advisory Committee of the German Parliament, which said yesterday, NPT and TPNW are two elements of a disarmament architecture, is a sharp slap for the German and all NATO governments, and it's a big support for the people's power which make the treaty possible. IPB will continue working for even bigger support for the treaty and will help getting more governments into our peace boat. With our own World Conference in Barcelona in October, we will send a huge and important sign for disarmament, will help creating an atmosphere in the world for more peace and less weapons. But today, it is a time to rest, to breathe, and to celebrate. In the name of IPB, I invite you all to this first online party in the 130 years old history of the International Peace Bureau. But what reason could make it better than to have a party for the reason to celebrate the TPNW? The mothers and fathers of IPB, Bertha von Suttner or Sie McBride, would be happy and proud to all of us. We are acting in the spirit of all Hibakushas. I'm happy to welcome all of you to this extraordinary event. Welcome, the party starts.
Thank you so much, Raina, for giving this amazing introduction and for bringing us into the celebratory spirit of today, which is kind of the reason why we wanted to turn this into a proper party. We now have, sadly, as Raina just mentioned, there's a lot of activities happening today, so we couldn't get everyone to be here with us. But we have some video recordings from Liza Clark, who's IPB's co-president, Beatrice Finn from ICANN, Noam Chomsky, and Philip Jennings, who's also IPB's co-president, who are sharing their thoughts on the activism which has brought us here and also the coming year with us. So Eskil is going to now show us this video, and I hope you enjoy it.
Every problem we face has a feasible solution, which we know. There's a feasible solution to the pandemic. How do we know that? Because many countries are implementing. China, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, Senegal, all over the world, countries are able, New Zealand, countries are able to deal with it. So obviously the way to deal with it. Is the way to prevent the next one? Yes, we know how, just as we knew in 2003 how to prevent this one. So we know the methods, they're feasible. What about heating the environment? Yes, there are feasible measures which will essentially meet the IPC standards, give us a fair chance of solving the problem, even a better existence. Nuclear weapons, obviously we know how to deal with them, get rid of them.
Happy New Year and happy month of January, the month that the ban treaty enters into force. I'm in Italy now, and we have been very busy all month, and we're looking forward to the 12 noon appointment on the 22nd of January. I know that that's probably the time that you're listening to me on this video, but I'm not speaking live because I am standing in front of the Aviano Air Base where the US nuclear weapons are stored. And other activists are going to be standing in front of the other air base in Gedi near Brescia, where US nuclear weapons are stored. But the activity in Italy has been fantastic over this month. The church bells are going to be ringing at exactly 12 noon to announce the entry into force of the ban treaty. It's welcoming the TPNW, it's called, as a campaign. The city councils that have approved resolutions in favor of the ban treaty have all printed up great big posters which they've hung in the courtyards of the city halls. And you know, in Italy, city halls tend to be beautiful historic buildings. Just think of the ones in Brescia or in Padova, which I'm sure many of you have seen pictures of. Well, it's really quite an extraordinary coalition that we've put together, and everyone is so determined that the entry into force is something we're going to be celebrating, because that is part of the work and the commitment that we've put into the ban treaty as part of ICANN as a coalition, of course, as part of IPB, but also the cities with Mayors for Peace and all this wealth of peace and disarmament activism. But we all know that there's still a lot more work to be done, especially in a US nuclear weapon complicit state like Italy. And we're determined, and we're not going to stop. So for now, we celebrate, but then we get back to work right away tomorrow morning.
Hi, my name is Beatrice Finn. I'm the Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And I want to talk a little bit about how entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons will change the global landscape for nuclear disarmament. I think it's first really important to remember that we really haven't had a ban on nuclear weapons before. We haven't had that legally binding rejection of nuclear weapons globally. And it's therefore a real achievement for the nuclear disarmament movement. For the first time ever, international law will say that the use, the possession, the maintenance, the development, and assisting with those acts is prohibited under international law. And that will shift norms and expectations and behavior around nuclear weapons around the world. And no, unfortunately, international law does not work like that. It won't happen on the 23rd of January that we wake up and the world will drastically look different. But it will change over time. And this is not something that we just believe will happen or wish will happen. We've seen this with other treaties, other disarmament treaties like the Chemical Weapons Convention, Biological Weapons Convention, landmines, cluster munitions, but also other international instruments, the United Nations Charter, the Geneva Conventions. All these international agreements do shift state behavior. It does regulate how people act, and it shifts behavior over the long term. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many times the Nobel Peace Prize, for example, has gone to treaty negotiations, multilateral institution, international law, and the organizations and individuals behind those treaties and instruments, because the Nobel Committee knows that that is working. That is actually an effective way to get to a better world. So we are going to see, hopefully, that the pressure on nuclear armed states and nuclear allied states will grow. We will see, for example, divestment campaigns. We will see more cities speaking out. We will see much more parliamentary work. We're already seeing huge public sort of support in many of the nuclear allied states for nuclear disarmament, for joining the treaty. And what this treaty is going to do is going to give that legal basis under international law, that this is what international law says, and why is my government standing on the wrong side of that law? So really, I think that this will have a significant impact over the years. We need to be pushing forward and making sure that that happens and not take it for granted. We need to be also patient and let this take time. This is not a sprint. Getting into a world without nuclear weapons is not going to happen overnight. But it really is the final phase of this 75-year-long battle that we've had in this movement. So I'm very, very excited about this. Now that the treaty enters into force, the next steps for implementing the treaty will be first some very practical, concrete things. 30 days after the entry into force, all governments need to be submitting their declaration, confirming if they have or not, or if they don't have nuclear weapons. For non-nuclear armed states, that's very straightforward. We will work on getting that together with the United Nations, together with ICRC, and together with governments, of course. But then the treaty becomes legally binding. Of course, we are focusing on certain provisions that we think are going to be very important going forward. In particular, for example, the victim assistance and environmental remediation, which can be practical effort and work to really address the rights and needs of communities impacted by nuclear weapons use or testing. And this is something that is continuing to be a problem for many communities in, for example, Marshall Islands, in Kazakhstan, in Algeria, and of course also Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we're really looking forward to working with governments to see if we can take concrete steps to address these rights and needs of surviving communities. Another thing that's really next for the implementation is Article 12, which is a legally binding commitment by states parties to universalize the treaty. So this means that these 51 states parties that have ratified the treaty have a legally binding obligation to get more countries on board. And we will start developing action plans and toolkits for governments as well to utilize their work and their embassies and their political strength on the international arena to really further the treaty's goals and objectives. And of course, we're looking forward to a first meeting of states parties, which is meant to be held within a year of the entry into force of the treaty. We already know that Austria has indicated that they are interested in hosting this. So we're really excited, which will be a really a huge moment for the treaty, where the treaty sort of formal processes and institutions will come into place and start having an impact. So of course we also will work on sort of supporting the treaty in communities that have not yet joined it. For example, we will work with divestment for financial institutions, for banks and pension funds, getting more and more. We're seeing a huge trend that these banks and pension funds are really looking into ethical investments, sustainable investments. And we need to make sure that now they update their exclusion list to also include companies that make nuclear weapons. We will continue to work on cities and local authorities to kind of mobilize public pressure in there. We will also work, of course, with parliamentarians. We've seen a lot of interesting developments also regarding to elections in NATO states, where we can see that the support for joining the treaty is growing also in the political context of these countries. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and it's a really exciting phase to be a part of this campaign. And I think we can see some great results at the end of 2021.
My name is Philip Jennings, and I'm the co-president of the International Peace Bureau. What a way to start our 130th anniversary year. I'm very happy to share this day of celebration with you, this milestone in the history of the campaign against nuclear weapons. You know, it's been a shadow on all our lives. I remember when I was, 8, 9 years old, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I was in the front garden of the house where I lived and looked up at the sky. And I saw this vapor trail, this streak. And I remember saying to my mates, that's a nuclear weapon up there. And then we were told at school and elsewhere that all we had to do was hide under the kitchen table and everything would be fine. I also remember seeing the film On the Beach with Neville Shute, and the message from that film is there are no survivors in a nuclear war. And then we fast forward to 1982. I remember the Euro missile crisis. I remember in particular the Palmer report, the message on common security. He brought 17 global leaders, experts together, and he said nobody survives a nuclear war. We need a new sense. We shouldn't base this world on mutual deterrence. This is about a mutual idea of common security. When we look at this world today, of rivalry, of tension, of their approach to government as being competition, I can beat the other. No to cooperation, no to multilateralism. And in that, we have 14,000 nuclear weapons, 3,000 ready to fire, and record expenditure on military expenditure. Oh dear, we need a new push for common security. 3 years ago, I was at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony, and I remember Setsuko Turlo and Beatrice Finn speaking. And Beatrice was marvelous that day when she said, either we end them or they end us. And since that time, we have the treaty, a treaty which is now law from this day on, a prohibition of nuclear weapons. And I can say to all those nuclear powers, you can try to hide under the kitchen table, you can hide away from a public discussion, but we're not going to allow that to happen. We have this treaty, a day of celebration. In this, our 130th anniversary, the entire peace movement is revitalized. We are energized, the messages to people. The young generation have got it. If we stand together, mobilize together, we can change the world discussion about this climate crisis. We will stand together, we will organize together, we will mobilize together to put this treaty into practice. Congratulations to all of you. Have a great day. And I look forward to this anniversary year and to our Congress in Barcelona, where we hope to record even more progress. Best of luck to all of you, and thank you.
Thank you again to Philip, who I think just entered our meeting as well. So you might be able to actually chat with him in person a little bit later in one of the breakout rooms. Now, after hearing these inspiring words, I would like to take you on a little bit of a experience through the last 75 years, because Ariel Dennis, who's now a consultant for the International Peace Bureau, but has also worked for 10 years as a co-chair of the French peace movement, Mouvement de la Paix, excuse my really, really horrible French. And from 2011 until 2016, she's been the campaign director for the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. So ICAN, who from Beatrice Finn we've also just had. And she's one of the most qualified people I know who can talk about the last 75 years of nuclear disarmament activism that have brought us here today. So I'm going to invite Ariel to take over and tell us a little bit of history.
Thank you very much. It's great. I hope I can share my screen very soon, but I just wanted to say hello to all of you and the people I know, most of you, but also the one I don't know, and say, after all what have been said very nicely and much better than I can say, that one of the great merit of the TPNW is that it has and it does more and more unite the anti-nuclear weapons family. And when we are united, we are much, much stronger. So it's great. It's a great privilege to now try to go through this in 10 pictures and in 10 minutes also, try to go through this history of the fight against nuclear weapons. And I will share my screen and my little PowerPoint with you. Hopefully I get it. And here it is. Okay, so the first picture is, of course, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the start of everything. The nuclear weapon became a reality, and a terrible reality for hundreds of thousands of people directly affected in Japan. And at first, I wanted to pay tribute to the invaluable contribution of the Hibakusha, the nuclear weapon survivors, all along these years, these 76 years. And as I can see, as you can see on the picture, there is Setsuko Thurlow. Philip Jennings just mentioned her. She is a survivor of the bomb, and she was 13 when the bomb was dropped on her school. And most of her classmates died in terrible suffering. And she's a marvelous advocate against nuclear weapons. She has been accompanying the TPNW process all along. And she here is at the table, at the tribune of the Nobel Peace Prize, as she's a co-recipient of the ICAN Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, she was sharing the speeches. So thank you to all of the Hibakusha for their contribution. The next slide might say a bit to some of the eldest among us. The Stockholm Appeal is a really impressive appeal that was launched both in the Cold War had just started, and everybody in the world, even in Russia or in Soviet Union at this time and in the US, shared this appeal, and we got, I don't know, 3 million, 4 million signatures. But in this picture, you can see, well, I can't see it very much, but you can see that there are famous people who joined. And in France, we had the painter Pablo Picasso, who made a painting for that, and also Henri Matisse. So it is really the first international action against nuclear weapon, and from the start, the whole world global movement did raise. Now we are the third picture is a tribute to the invaluable contribution of the scientists from all sorts who have contributed to raise awareness and to give us the truth about nuclear weapons. And here you can see Joseph Rotblat on behalf of Pugwash receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, but of course the very important Einstein-Russell Manifesto, who say this incredible sentence that I think we can always put in the front line of our actions, like remember your humanity and forget the rest. And also Frédéric Joliot-Curie, I wanted to have his picture here because he's the father of the French peace movement, but also he was the father of the nuclear industry in France. And in 1945, that's the first United Nations gathering, he came and said, we would like a law, an international law to make sure nuclear energy or nuclear issues and research and industry will never be linked with weapons. And he was, he was dismissed and he was kicked out of the French nuclear industry. It's a pity because otherwise France would have been much less nuclear. This is the 60s, and the 60s have been terrible for the Cold War. It has really raged. And here you have this amazing birth of the CND. I know there are many people from CND in this celebration, so I wanted to pay tribute to their enormous contribution, and of course to this sign of CND, which has become the sign that we use to say that we use against nuclear weapons and for nuclear disarmament. So the 60s have been also starting to see a lot of big demonstrations against the bomb. Then the end of the 60s, because of our mobilization, because of a bit of a détente between the two big nuclear powers, they have been the first international treaty that has been signed and ratified by some in 1968. It is a non-proliferation treaty, which is still called the cornerstone of the non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament, although it has not been as efficient as we would have wished, because it's Article 6 that speaks about nuclear disarmament doesn't have any date or precise engagement of the 5 nuclear powers that have signed it. But it is still a great occasion for all the movement to meet and pressure government. So this is a picture of the last demonstration in 2015. And you can see people from all over the world, and I guess some of you were there. And you can see also the mayor of Hiroshima addressing the crowd. And I can pay tribute to mayors and elected people that have always been, some of them, of course, have always been very dedicated to our cause. That is amazing. This is what women can do. And I wanted to pay a special tribute to women's contribution to the peace movement and the nuclear disarmament movement. These pictures are from Greenham Common. The camp of Greenham Common started in 1981 and lasted 48 weeks. Can you imagine that? 48 weeks of occupation in the mud, in the dust, winter, in the rain, and the fight against the cops all the time. And they managed to kick the US missiles out, and they closed after 48 weeks. They closed the camp, the military camp. So that's thank you to all the women, and I know quite a lot of quite some of them who are still in the movement now and who have been having a leading role. And yeah, that's great to think about them and think about the genius of women when they fight. The next one is the 80s. So that's a German protest, because I think that the spirit of all this fight against the Pershing and SS-20 really was, inspiring and inspired by the German peace movement. It was enormous, and in all over Europe, we fought against the implementation of short-range missiles. And that was together with the movement freeze that happened at the meantime in the US. And we had, we won, in fact. We had this INF treaty, which Donald Trump went out recently. And you can see Ronald Reagan and Michael Gorbachev signing the treaty here. I want to say about that also that Michael Gorbachev, in his memories, says that they would not have signed the treaty if they would not have had this information from the physicians about the nuclear famine and about the nuclear winter. So this is a direct tribute to the movement and their contribution to the movement. And then we do have kind of proof, because it is the post-Cold War time, and two of them are, one is a comprehensive test ban treaty, of course, on 96, and also the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice that was asked to answer the question, are nuclear weapons legal, and the use of nuclear weapon, is it legal? And it is really great improvements, although we didn't have exactly what we wanted, because there was still a little sentence saying that, if their vital interest is threatened, there is some kind of legality of the fact that a country used them. I wanted to also show you the picture of this gentleman. He's called Karipek. He's a survivor of the nuclear test in Kazakhstan. He's an impressive advocate against nuclear weapons. He was born without arms, and he's painting with his mouse. He's an artist. And I wanted him to be with us today. So, sorry, but 10 minutes is very short. Here is the start of the humanitarian initiative. 2007 is the birth of ICAN, International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons. Most of the movement, anti-nuclear movement, brought to life on, I think it was in Vienna, in a Vienna meeting of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and then started to refocus on the abolition of nuclear weapons. And in 2015, the idea of a treaty to ban nuclear weapons really emerged, with also the focal point of the humanitarian approach. So that was then called the Humanitarian Initiative on Nuclear Weapons. And here you can see one of the three conferences on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons with the still Prime Minister of Austria. He was at the time Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I think speaking about that is that it's amazing that before 2013, the first Oslo conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, never countries had come together to think about what would be the result of a nuclear war. And it's really irresponsible in regard to the people of the planet. So these three humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons conferences really brought awareness to the governments and put the idea of the ban on the center of the debates, and then started the negotiation. So that's a picture of the negotiation and the votes. And you can see the president of the conference. She's an amazing diplomat from Costa Rica. She's a young lady, and you can see how many women are in the background. And again, the 2017 negotiation, who drafted the treaty, was the reason why ICANN was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. So you just saw Beatrice and Setsuko and at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. And well, that's where we are now. So I say it again because I love it. The TPNW prohibits nations from developing, testing, producing, manufacturing, transferring, possessing, stockpiling, using or threatening to use nuclear weapons, or allowing nuclear weapons to be stationed on their territory. It also prohibits them from assisting, encouraging, or inducing anyone to engage in any of these activities. So nuclear weapons are banned, and it's the start of the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ariel, for giving us this perspective